It's Monday, September 15th, and a break from severe weather has arrived to the United States. We can see that we don't really have an area outlined by the Storm Prediction Center for any severe storms today. It's just that general threat for a couple of thunderstorms in this light green shaded area. We also do have a couple of isolated areas on the eastern coast of the US as well. If I do think there was going to be any severe weather today, though, I think it would be up here in the northern plains and then also potentially down here in parts of the Mississippi River Valley, and then also kind of the central plains and Midwest. But I think overall the threat for severe weather today is going to be pretty low. Now, for activity on the tropical front, it's going to actually be kind of a bit of the opposite. We have this big invest out here, which now has a 70% chance of formation. The question is now kind of changing from will it form to where it's going to go. Now, luckily, the models are steering it away from the US, but unfortunately for our friends in Bermuda, it looks like they could potentially see this system, or at least that's what our models are leaning towards. Let's hope it trends away from that. And here is a better look on the European model. Here is going to be our invest right here, and we're going to look for that big swooping motion back out into the Atlantic. We can actually see that the Euro is predicting that this could form into at least a tropical system of sorts later this week. And there it is right there. We're going to see that it's going to start to curve back out into the Atlantic pretty abruptly. It's going to be sucked by one of those troughs or cold fronts pushing off of the US coast, but it also takes a pretty abrupt turn in that direction of Bermuda. Let's hope it doesn't do that. Actually, we are still a pretty far way out from this actually happening, so it will likely change, at least for this track. But as we can see, the Euro is predicting that this could become a Cat 3, potentially weak Category 4 storm. So definitely big business right here for this storm. But let's hope it just keeps this trend of curving away from the US and it won't affect Bermuda at all. But back to our thunderstorm risk, here is that area down here in the Mississippi River Valley and also a bit of the central plains and Midwest. This risk is mostly going to be in Arkansas, Missouri, and then even far western Tennessee. It's just going to be because of our big trough right up here, kind of starting to move upslope. We also have a bit of a troughing activity going on as well, with potentially the embedded low pressure system and also some frontal activity as well. And then that big ridge up here is going to bring some organizational shear to these storms also. So it looks like we could potentially see a cluster of thunderstorms. If any of these storms could cluster together and start to get organized, we could potentially see a couple of severe characteristics being produced by a couple of cells. But other than that, this is just going to be an increased area of thunderstorm activity in the US today. Nothing really crazy going on here. And then the second area I want to look at is going to be up here in the northern plains. This actually has the greater potential for potentially producing some severe weather. Today, in my opinion, we can see that big cyclone pushing off into Canada. This created some of our severe weather yesterday, and we also could potentially see a short window in the early afternoon for a couple of cells bubbling up in northern Minnesota. These could potentially bring that threat for some damaging winds and hail, although it looks like they're not going to mature until they reach Canada, so we might actually dodge that threat. But another area I want to look at is going to be down here in parts of eastern Wyoming, eastern Montana, and then the western parts of the Dakotas. We're going to have another trough pushing through here, a low pressure system, and then also some forcing for storms. This blob right here could potentially produce some severe characteristics, but it looks pretty unlikely. If it were to, it would be when that low level jet kicks in, when these storms are already pretty far deep into parts of South and North Dakota. But it looks like this is just going to be a pretty disorganized cluster of some thunderstorms, mainly just bringing some rain and gusty winds, and that would be it. Again, nothing really crazy going on out here. And this is a better look at that trough bringing a lot of our weather today. First things first, we can see that trough digging in across the northern plains. This is going to be the causer of some of our thunderstorms out here today. And this more deep trough up here potentially bringing a line of storms to northern Minnesota, although it looks like those are going to mature a bit further into Canada, mostly dodging that risk in the US. But another thing we see is this ridge potentially bringing some organizing shear to that region of thunderstorms in western Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri. Then also some upslope flow, potentially a front embedded in here as well. And that's going to be mostly it for the forecasting for our storms today. We're not really going to take a deep dive into the storm ingredients from a weather sounding because none of the weather soundings are really looking interesting enough to do that, in my personal opinion. But we are going to take a look at some of the expected temperatures today. Interestingly, it's actually going to be a bit of a flip of what we've been seeing the past couple of months. Out west, it's going to be some beautiful weather, potentially reaching even the 40s in some parts of the Rockies, but pretty much everywhere else west of the Great Plains, likely going to be seeing some mid 70s. Feels like temperatures today. The warmest part of the country today is actually going to be the Midwest, Great Lakes, and the Great Plains and the river valleys, likely seeing some high 80s to mid 90s. Feels like temperatures. And then our eastern coast is actually going to see a bit of a cool off from what we've been seeing normally, with actually a low of potentially 65 degrees in parts of North Carolina. That's going to be really nice for anybody up there. And that's going to be for the feels like temperature. And then anybody else on the East Coast, instead of seeing those 90s, it's likely going to be mid 80s. And the further north you go, transitioning into mid 70s. So overall, temperature wise, it's going to be very nice. And severe weather wise, we're not really expecting anything severe today. So overall, it looks like it's going to be a pretty nice day for most of the country.